every time I come to the pulpit, I think we have people that are tuned in that know God is not the author of fear. We don't hunker down when we hear whispers of things. We who are people of the book, it resonates with us, wars and rumors of wars. But let me just tell you something so that you can kind of go, okay, if God's word is true and if the prophecies in this book are true, there are many things that must happen before any type of nuclear Armageddon happens, okay? So that is just, by the way, a lot of this is scare tactics, it's deflection, so that we as Americans, by the way, should not, this has been probably the biggest mission that's had the greatest success, that we as Americans should not band together regardless of our color, that is our affiliation politically or our skin color or anything else, to band together as Americans. I don't care. Listen, this is the land, the great melting pot, but when you come to this country and I'm talking to my immigrant friends and people like me who are immigrants to this country, you don't come here and hold on to the country you came from. You come to this country and you identify as American. You are looking at the flag that decades-long wars fought for you and I to enjoy the freedom and liberty of this country. It's time for people to start recognizing that we as a people, as a populace, have had a real number done on us. Separate and divide the people. Plant seeds of hatred. Make people think that the agenda of wokeism or whatever it is that's being, that's all a deflection for us not to pay attention to the main critical thing that we should all be focused on. America is falling apart because the people who want to divide are succeeding. Now, I'm not preaching syncretism. I read about the mission, I believe this last week or two, about the Pope who is trying to integrate. And I think it's wonderful if leaders of all faiths can come together and talk, but don't make it as though we should be homogenizing and taking in everybody and acting like we are not separate entities. We are. That's what makes a Christian, or a Jew, or a Muslim. Don't make it as though we have to all agree on our differences, which this country says is a God-given right to enjoy freely, to choose to enjoy freely, whatever you choose. But first and foremost, the time for us to come together as Americans, there couldn't be a greater time and a greater need. Because see, the fearmongers and the people who are peddling the information and the fear and the constant pressing down and depressing of this nation, if you really take a look at who's doing it, it's a select few who have great power. And we, the people, still have the power. I think we think we've become weak and impotent because it seems like there's greater forces at work. Well, there are, my friends, and it's not the government, although we may think it's the government. There are greater forces at work. The prince of the power of the air that does his bidding through willing vessels, willing to do his bidding, planting seeds of discord, disunion, division, everything that you could possibly imagine that is happening in this day and age. So I'm just going to say this to you because I've carried this around for so long and it's at the boiling point for me. If you came to this country as an immigrant, you're very, very lucky. I'm very lucky. I'm very privileged. And if you came as an immigrant, it's wonderful to say my heritage is. But once you step on this land, you are American and you are responsible to protect, like every other American born here or came here decades ago. It doesn't matter. We all have a responsibility to protect our freedoms, our rights, and to not let, I don't care if it's government, media, or otherwise, destroy, because they are destroying, and the people are letting it happen. And when will we as a people say, enough, I've had enough, I don't want to hear, excuse me, I don't want to hear about these fake divisions of people or are they real out there? Maybe it's a small percentage, but it's a small percentage, and it's the small percentage that is having the majority voice. What is wrong with this idea? And I'll tell you, we're forgetting that we, the people, still have the power. Not just when it comes time to vote, but you can make your preference known, where you spend your money, whether you support a woke corporation or not. And I take a risk right now of saying all this to you, if you can believe that. As being a proud patriot, I take a risk, like many people who have a platform, because it's very easy in this day to be canceled if somebody doesn't like what you're saying, even if it is the truth. And let me tell you, the risk for churches in these days is very great. And I say that without being a drama person here. Everywhere you look, the church is trying to figure out how it can appease the people, how to not offend. When did we become such a wimpish country that we're offended by somebody saying, your religion or your identity or your theology or your personality or your clothes or your look or your TikTok videos, you suck? Since when did that become the agenda for us to coil back and be offended? In fact, I'm surprised, I'm shocked, because Americans have always been fighting for freedom. Since when did we become the people to step back and let somebody encroach upon and say, well, you don't have a voice anymore and you're not allowed to speak? Unless we have wholeheartedly moved to another continent, this is still America, and we the people still have rights. So, please, do not succumb to this fear-mongering. Do not succumb to the idea somehow that this is the inevitable pathway we must face. So there's an inevitable pathway we must face. It's written in here. And when every voice is telling you, duck, shelter yourself, you need to isolate yourself, pull back, resist that. As much, by the way, and I've said this before, please educate yourself on what may be happening in the future of our country, especially with the possible digitization of our currency, which will take on the model of other countries where there is no more freedom, where you as a citizen will be monitored for everything that you do, every dime you spend, and if where you put your money is not agreed upon and given the nod, you could be cut off. Please read and educate yourself, because the time for our voices to be heard is now. Not waiting for an election, which, I'm sorry, results of that may or may not be true based on past representations. If we as a state, think about it, I'm sure many of you signed a petition to recall the lawless, lack of law enforcement, laissez-faire DA. And there were enough signatures to have a recall, but guess what? It didn't happen. Likewise, for the rest of the kabuki theater going on in our state. So if you don't do your part as a citizen, in your community, in your state, if you don't do your part, don't think somebody else is going to do it for you, because that's how the battle is lost. And remember that. I'm not ready. I'm sorry. I'm not ready to lose my freedoms. I'm not ready to have somebody tell me I can't talk about the Bible, because that's coming down the pipeline, because we have so many people saying, well, that's offensive and that's hate speak. Well, if it's hate speak, it's God's word and not mine. And I'm not going to have somebody shut me up, as I was brought here to be the mouthpiece for this book for him. So if you put it in perspective, the angle is basically to silence the churches, the last bastion of people who will be bold and speak the truth, silence them, and then maybe the rest of the people can just do what people do, which is go their own way and maybe succumb to the fear and everything else that comes with it. I choose not to, and I'm urging you to stand up for your rights and protect those rights, because they could if we don't all band together as Americans. As I said, I don't care. I've never cared about skin color. I've never cared about these fake divisions that have been created. There's only one thing I care about, and that is maintaining the integrity, the dignity that we once had in this country. I want that back. If I could, I hate to say it because I hate to use these words, if I could turn back time, I know I'm not Cher, but if I could, there's a lot of things that I would change, not about me, not about you, but definitely about what's happened. I don't like the direction. And if you don't like the direction either, as I said, you speak with your voice, you speak with your pocketbook. Look into the companies and the products that you buy, the agendas that these companies may have, and you make your own. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm saying educate yourself, though, and look into these things, because unbeknownst to me, for example, it's a favorite laundry detergent that I like to use, and way back then I bought cases of it sitting in my laundry room. And now I look at it, because I have to use it up, I won't be wasteful, but I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, if I only knew what that company represented when I bought all that soap, I'd probably be opening up those bottles and pouring them down somebody's mouth because of what that company represents and the values they're representing. And by the way, I don't understand, since when did a soap company or a clothing company or any other company have so much power over the people as to dictate to you what you should be endorsing? So that's all I have to say. I think if we, people of God, and I use that as a very generic term, don't get our stuff together, it's not anybody else that's going to do it. It'll be the people who still fear God, who recognize that those God-given, God-fearing rights that are granted to us must be protected and preserved at all cost. So we are not, I am not afraid. What time I am afraid, I will trust in the Lord and not be afraid, and I will not fear what the enemy can do to me. And all of these wonderful Bible passages should dwell in your heart, that when the little bit of fear does come because you've opened up and listened to something fearful, you rebuke it and you stand strong and you say, that is not the way. And maybe you'll be the one, maybe I'll be the one, maybe individually we may not be standing as a body per se, but we all stand for something. Because if you don't stand for anything, you got nothing. And that's pretty much what this next generation is looking for, nothing. So that's all I have to say on that. And there are plenty of people who get very mad at me, or they get very upset when I say these things, but I'm just going to tell you, I am a proud American. I am not ashamed of this country, only of the latest behaviors that have internationally disgraced us, and the things domestically that seem to be the perversion of the few who cannot figure out that they are without God. And quite frankly, you don't need to be very religious to see that.
Come into this house, magnify the Lord, lift up holy hands, our hearts in one accord, worship and bow down before